On the bright and early morning of July 16, 1945, a brilliant blast of light filled the sky near White Sands in central New Mexico. Soon a gigantic cloud formed, and this was the result of the first atomic bomb test led by the United States government. This was called the Trinity Test, codenamed the Gadget. This device derived from the Manhattan Project, a secret scientific project located in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and led by Robert Oppenheimer, also known as the father of the atomic bomb. The Manhattan Project came about due to a plea from Albert Einstein to President Franklin Roosevelt in order to develop a nuclear weapon before the Germans did so. Einstein, in fact, heard that the German scientists were creating such a bomb, and this would give them a huge advantage in World War II. Now, although Einstein was heavily involved in this project, he didn't work directly in New Mexico because he was at high visible security risk. Now, as we know, this project was very secretive, but only months later, the U.S. government tested similar bombs and dropped them in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, resulting in the horrific destruction of World War II. So this project was very secretive, so most of the citizens in New Mexico had no idea about what was going to happen when they tested this bomb. But now, as I say, the Army did try to send written letters to rural farmers and ranchers, but the letters were extremely vague and most landowners were missed. In 1945, the common citizen would not have understood the power of nuclear energy, much less the after effects of an atomic bomb. For example, what precautions would a farmer take when simply being warned that the military would be testing a quote-unquote device? Now, Jack Zumwalt, who's my grandfather's cousin, worked upon the White Sands Missile Range at the time as a possible herdsman for a group of cattle that roamed the military lands. He told his son Warren that he witnessed the test up close, and he was given a cardboard rectangle about 5 inches by 10 inches to help protect his eyes. But this is where it starts to get interesting. After the bomb had been set off, Jack noticed something very strange about his once Hereford cattle, which, by the way, are a red breed of cattle with white markings. But now, they were all completely white. A large cloud of fog covered the areas of New Mexico, and Jack just assumed that his cattle were simply dusted with this radioactive dust, but after closer investigation, he and his brothers Ray and Mert soon realized that this was not the case. Months later at sale time, Jack reported the cattle from his herd as having brindled hair, or as what they called it, atomic hair. Now, the people at the sale rings laughed at them. Keep in mind, they had no warnings of the plutonium fallout. Plutonium is a chemical element of atomic number 94 and used as fuels in nuclear reactors. It tarnishes when exposed to air and creates a dull coating once oxidized. But you might not see the extremity of it here, just a few cows turned white, but the grim reality was revealed over the following years, and this strange dust contaminated soils, hayfields, livestock, crops, and even people. The known half-life of plutonium is 24,000 years, but these quiet and innocent farmers continued on with their daily chores, milking, plowing the fields, feeding, and many more. During this time, there was little access to electricity, which meant little access to water. Most of the citizens' waters were stored in cisterns, which drained off of people's rooftops. Now, keep in mind, this strange dust covered many areas of New Mexico, along with many things in it. So all of these rooftops were contaminated. That meant that their water was now contaminated with this radioactive residue. Well, all the living plants and animals drank from streams and reservoirs, so therefore all the living things were not only drinking, but sometimes they were even bathing in this contaminated water. But the poison was silent and unseen. As I mentioned before, the group of cattle at the White Sands had atomic hair. Well, this also meant that they had atomic blood and atomic meat. That went the same for crops grown such as corn, hay, and chilies. Somewhat unnoticed for years, the damage of this strange residue began to be visible in the damage of human lives. For example, the cancer rate started to peak in New Mexico, and it was focused around the test sites of the atomic bomb. Something very similar happened to this in Japan. Another atomic bomb was dropped, and it takes about 10 seconds for a nuclear reaction to reach its maximum height, but the after effects last for decades and are passed on to generations and generations. Only a decade later, the survivors of the bombing in Japan started noticing that they were getting cancerous infections. Now, cancer related to radiation, it continues to grow throughout these survivors' lives, even to this day, 7 decades later. Now, Jack the herdsman, who I mentioned before, ended up dying of cancer as well, and although this may be a coincidence, but the fact that the list continues on throughout my family says something else. His daughter, who lived and went to school in Carrizozo, died of cancer. His son died of prostate cancer. His brother Mert and both of Mert's sons also died of cancer. So as you can see, many people in my family have been affected by this strange radioactive dust, along with many other families. Now, it could have happened a plethora of different ways, but like I said before, it contaminated nearly everything: food, water, and shelter. And what is that? The 3 basic needs of human life. So as you can see, this strange residue caused quite the commotion throughout New Mexico. Quite frankly, it took over not only the land, but the people that lived among it as well, whether they knew it or not, and most of the time they didn't. This is a story of the powerful effects of destructive forces, the poisoning of agricultural products such as crops and livestock, and the harming of innocent farmers and ranchers of New Mexico. Thank you.